Hi everybody, and thanks for joining me today. So continuing to work on the flowers that are at far right-hand edge of this pass. I have less than 2,000 stitches to go to complete this pass, so yeah, I'm thinking it will happen this month. So yeah, today just kind of building up over here. I'm not really sure exactly what I'm stitching, if this is the center of a flower, or I think it might more likely it's the shadow between a couple of flowers, because I think the centers are more reddish. So yeah, that is what I'm stitching today. Yeah, because I did the math and it's 178,000 stitches total for this pass to be completed, and or I think it's 176, sorry. I can't remember. But yeah, it's less than 2,000. All right, so yeah, it has been mega slippery out there on the roads, because yeah, we're having days that go above freezing, and then we had freezing rain, so yeah, that's real fun. But yeah, I was really anxious about my son driving on that ice, but he's doing really well. So I mean, I guess I shouldn't be so anxious. He did it last winter already. Yeah, so, but that was driving my vehicle, which was the automatic, and now he's got to deal with shifting gears because he drives the stick on his truck, so. Yeah, my husband told me you have more control with that, but I'm like, I don't know, for me it's just so many extra steps that, yeah. No thanks. Yeah, I still need to buy myself my Christmas gift. I haven't done that yet. I keep meaning to, but I keep forgetting. Try to remember to do that today. So yeah, I got to give it time to arrive here, since I am doing my shopping online mostly. Okay. Yeah, I can see there's quite a lot of this color scattered around, so we are probably going to end up with multiple threads for it, as per my usual. Yeah, not as many big blocks here, as you can probably tell from how many threads I have parked around here. Yeah, but still making some pretty good progress, so I'm happy with that. Okay. Yeah, like I said, a lot of these colors kind of intersect and branch off, and so. Yeah. We'll see what I manage. Last time I managed 200 in a session, so we'll see. There is sort of a combination, I think, of big blocks and confetti here, so yeah, probably make about medium speed. 38, 37. Ooh. Oh my goodness. Oh, I actually slept well last night, but I guess I haven't the few nights before, so I need to catch up, yeah. As I'm getting older, I find I don't really have the ability to sleep in so much anymore. like even on days I don't have to get up at a certain time, yeah, I still end up waking up when I normally would. So I don't push it, because they do say if you try to keep the same sleep schedule, it can help. Yeah, so. But yeah, I guess they say it shifts as you age, and that's why they said early bird specials are like 4 p.m. for the seniors, right? Because they said, yeah, sort of when you're a kid, you wake up early. When you hit teenage years, you tend to be more nocturnal. And then, yeah, when you get older, it changes again, which is what I seem to be dealing with as I am in my 40s now. Yeah. I said, though, the frustrating thing is I wake up before the alarm would go off on weekends, and then weekdays, the alarm wakes me up and I'm in the middle of a dream and I'm all groggy. Like, go figure. I said, yeah, that's the worst. We're in the middle of a dream cycle. You feel so sluggish. Well, they say it's that in your deepest sleep, your body actually is almost paralyzed, can't move. And they said that's why sometimes in nightmares, like, you have that feeling you can't move, and it's probably you're actually sensing that on a subconscious level. Yeah, because they said, like, people who sleepwalk, that mechanism doesn't work well enough, because that's the whole point, is it's supposed to keep you from wandering around and that. And then there's people who have the opposite. They have the sleep paralysis, so sometimes you wake up and you're conscious, but you can't move for a first minute or so. Yeah, it can be pretty scary when you don't know what is going on, right? But yeah. Yeah, definitely not something you want to happen if you wake up from a bad dream and then you can't move. Yeah, that'd be pretty scary. Yeah, like I say, I wake up in the middle of a dream, but I don't really remember what I was dreaming. I used to dream really vividly and remember them, but that's rare for me now. My sister never remembered her dreams, she said. Yeah. I mean, she must dream because we have to in order to stay healthy. Yeah. If you never get into the REM sleep, yeah, it's very bad. It was funny though, because I saw a meme saying, imagine trying to explain sleeping to an alien species. Like, it says, yeah, we get into our special sleeping clothes and lie down on our sleeping mats and then hallucinate for hours. Cross-checking with my grid lines here to make sure I am in the right place. There's quite a few little steps along this edge. It would be easy to be a row off. Yeah, so again, I'm going to kind of probably cut it off around here. I have sort of a blob here, and then sort of some colors that kind of wrap around there, because there's another sort of circular area there. So yeah, I'm working this blob here a bit, and then I'll work the colors around it, is what I think I'm going to do. Can't believe it'll be time to start a new pass soon. That went by pretty quick. All right. Okay, just making sure again that I was on the correct side of the grid line, because there's one right there, which would have been a different color, and yeah, I want to make sure I'm picking up the correct thread, not mixing myself up. Yeah, so like I said, there's not as many colors here, but I do have to kind of juggle back and forth a bit to keep from closing in stuff. Okay, so this is a medium length thread. So that often influences which direction I decide to go in when colors are sort of branching off in different directions. Yeah, the length of the thread I have to work with will often influence what I want to do. Okay, I'm actually going to, whoops, my thumb was too big to target that. Yeah, I used to use a stylus with my tablet for Pattern Keeper, but then I kind of discovered that it was an extra step picking it up and putting it down. And so I started just using my fingers, and yeah, that works just as well. I do kind of have to wipe down my screen later to get my greasy little finger trails off it, but yeah. Yeah, sort of anything I can do to save myself a little time means the whole project can go a little quicker. It adds up. Like I said, switching to my envelope storage system also sped up my stitching, because otherwise I was spending a lot of time unwinding stuff from the bobbin and then winding it back on, and yeah. So I found now, if I have an extra piece of thread, just put it back in the envelope very quickly and grab the next. Yeah. Little things add up. Plus, I like not having kinks in my thread anymore, because that makes it knot up more, and we don't want that, right? Yeah, tangles are not fun. Yeah, in fact, I remember, actually, I've mentioned before, I knit as well, and I'm on Ravelry, which is like a social networking site for knitters and crocheters. And there was a group, I remember, that was specifically for untangling yarn, because some people actually enjoy doing that. And so they said that people would exchange addresses and stuff and ship their hopelessly tangled yarn out to someone, and the person would untangle it and ship it back. And they often would ship, you know, little treats in there as a thank you, like chocolates or, you know, stitch markers or something like that. And yeah, thought that was kind of cool. When I was a kid, I used to love untangling things. Yeah. My mom would give me her necklaces when they were all stuck together, and I would sit there detangling them for hours. So yeah, those little chains can really snarl up on you sometimes and not want to let go. Yeah, I read one tip as well, was they said if you dust it in a little cornstarch, that can help as well. Yeah. Kind of keeps them from grabbing each other as much. I never did that, but yeah, that was one that I read, so. I find yarn is easier to untangle than embroidery thread, because generally it's thicker, right? I mean, it depends. There are some yarns that are really skinny, like sock yarns, but yeah, I don't knit with those much. Yeah, I have a sweater that I started, oh gee, years ago, and it's a really skinny yarn, and so yeah, It's taking forever because I'm on the plain part of the body now. The top was a cabled yoke, and then now I'm at the very boring part, the main body, which is just plain knitting around and around and around. So yeah. And I also find that because I'm knitting it on such tiny needles, I have to wear a thimble or a band-aid on my finger, otherwise it hurts. Yeah, so yeah, I kind of bring it on me when I'm on long car trips. Obviously I'm not the one driving. And yeah, kind of do it then. But yeah, gee, I think that's been over 10 years that it's been it's been on the needles. I don't know if I'll ever finish it or not. Wow, like I said, I used to knit more, but yeah, then I got into this full coverage cross stitch, and that sort of is taking more of my time. Okay, I'm gonna carry that a fair ways, but not too far. It's still within an inch, so. Okay, so let's see, how long is this one? All right, and so sometimes I'll do it out of order, but I try not to when I can help it. Sometimes that means adding an extra strand or using up a small little leftover bit. Yeah, it just depends. Alright, so I'm starting to get to sort of the limit of how many needles I like to keep going at one time. About 10, so it doesn't tangle on me. I have done more, but yeah. I find, yeah, I started doing about 15, but then I switched back and try to keep it to around 8 to 10. Ooh. Speaking of tangling, there we go. Okay, so I'm gonna take kind of a meandering route here. So let me just see. Yeah, just making sure I am in the right place again. But yeah, I have actually reached the edge for the stitches that were in higher rows. That's always exciting. So I did that one, and then I'm going to go do these. And then that way I can do the inverted triangle ones all at once without leaving any gaps. Get that to work, that is. Yes, so then I'm going to park it there, and then I'm going to do those. And that will probably use up this piece of thread. Yeah. After years of stitching, I've become pretty good at estimating how many stitches I will get out of a piece of thread. I'm usually pretty close. Of course, unless it decides to tangle up on me and I have to cut knots out, because yeah, unfortunately sometimes that happens. Okay, so actually I can get another couple, so I will do that. So yeah, I'm going to do another shorter piece for those 3 that are curving down that other way. Yeah, so we had a friend over for a pizza and movie night, and she recommended we watch Free Guy, starring Ryan Reynolds. It was lots of fun. It was basically, he's a NPC in a video game, in an open world video game, and he becomes self-aware. Yeah, and it was lots of fun. If you're a gamer, you'll see all sorts of fun little references. Like it shows the gal, she's picking up tools and then sort of putting them towards her back and dropping them, and they're disappearing because, yeah, like they're going into her inventory. And yeah, just fun stuff like that. And yeah, then there's, at one point, the developer forces them to release a character that isn't ready yet. It's still in like beta mode. And so, yeah, they'll say, you know, he says, my 3 favorite things are kicking butt, TBD, and third thing here. Because they're still in placeholders. Yeah. Yeah, it was funny. Like, if you've ever done any kind of programming, that made me laugh. Yeah, that is how you do it. And yeah, like he spawns and then he says, catchphrase, because he doesn't actually have one yet. Yeah. It was funny. Oh, I love Ryan Reynolds. He's hilarious. Speaking of which, we actually haven't watched the latest Deadpool and Wolverine movie, and I do plan to. It's on Disney Plus now, which we have right now, so. Yeah, I was surprised because Hugh Jackman said he was not going to play the Logan character again, because he said, you know, he's getting older and getting into shape for it is a lot harder now. Yeah. But, yeah, they managed to convince him to, so. Yeah, it was funny, too, because they said his was the last role to be cast in the first X-Men movie. And it was almost kind of an afterthought. And then, of course, he became sort of the biggest one of the franchise. They had, you know, prequel movie about him, and yeah. Okay, I'm gonna, oh, there's actually 4 there. Couldn't tell because the, all right. Well, it turns out I actually don't have any small pieces that are long enough, so I will just have to use a new, longer one. Okay. Yeah, and if you liked that kind of thing, we enjoyed the Jumanji remakes, because in the original movie in the 80s, it was a board game, and then in the reboots, it was a video game. And so, yeah, they had fun with that too. They end up in the game, and yeah, then the guy keeps repeating, why does this guy keep repeating himself? And then guy, because he's an NPC, you know. Yeah, because he's the guy driving them in the Jeep and says, you know, welcome everyone, I'm here to take you to the camp. And then he says a couple other things, and welcome everyone, I'm, you know, because that's how it is, right? With an NPC, yeah, they only have so many responses. Oh my gosh. There we go. Okay. Yeah, this is a very bright pink. It really pops. Yeah, so, and I was in a Facebook group saying, what are your stitching goals for the next year? I said, well, my spreadsheet says I might have this done by the end of 2025. So that's my hope, but not my goal, because yeah, like I say, I don't want to stress myself out. Yeah, if it's not done until spring of 2026, that'll be okay. But it would be pretty cool if I could finish it by the end of next year. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, we'll see, because it's taken me it took me over a year to get to 50%. So, yeah, we will see. But then, yeah, like I said, the first passes did take longer, so. Yeah, and it, of course, depends on how much confetti is left in the bottom of this piece. The very last pass, it sort of fades off into some pastels in the very lower right-hand corner, so that section I expect to go by pretty quick. And I have the peahen, her feathers on her back, on her wings, are quite detailed, but I still have some of her chest, which is not as many colors, so that part I expect to go by pretty quickly. So yeah, we'll see. There's kind of a mixture. And like I say, if I was stitching entirely on this piece and nothing on anything else, then I would have it done in a year. No problem. But yeah. But yeah, like I said, there's a couple of stitchers who have decided their goal is 500,000 stitches in the next year, which is just like, wow. And yeah, most of them are full cross as well. So yeah, mind blown. Yeah, people say I'm pretty quick, but I'm like 150 to maybe 180 stitches in a year. Yeah. 180,000, that is, not, just 150, because yeah, I managed that in like an hour. Okay, so. Yes, also said, I don't know if I'll make my reading goal by the end of the year. I still have, I think, 9 to go. I'm kind of seeking out novellas now, just so I can make the number. Yeah, but yeah, we'll see. It's going to be close. Well, my problem is I do have ones that I don't finish fairly often because I'm really strict about that now. If I'm not enjoying something, I'm not going to waste time reading it. So, yeah. Or sometimes I will flip to the last chapter just to see how things ended. But I don't count that as fully read if I only read, like, really read the first, third to half of it. That doesn't count. So Yeah, I have quite a few abandoned ones like that. So if I counted all sort of the ones that I have finished and decided I couldn't be bothered to actually finish, I would reach my goal, but I don't count those halves. So I only count ones that I actually finished the whole thing. So yeah. I did read more nonfiction this year though, so that was one of my goals, and I did do it. So not that there's anything wrong with reading fiction, but yeah, I sort of did have quite a big list of nonfiction books that I meant to read, someday, and never seemed to get around to. So now I alternate, and I'll read maybe a couple of books that are fiction, and then I'll read one nonfiction, and then, yeah, so. That should be one more stitch up. Yes. There we go. So yeah, like I said, it kind of changes another motif here, and I'm just going to kind of work where this kind of works over, sort of more horizontally. I'm going to just kind of cut it off there. Fill in all of that, and then shift downwards and fill in again. So yeah, like I said, I'm strict about, I used to be strict about finishing books, but then I kind of went, you know what? I only have a limited amount of time, so why waste it? It's not like it's required reading because, and yeah, because somebody said, reading for pleasure indicates there's a reading for pain. And somebody's like, so I see you've never done academia then. Because, yeah, you have to read a lot of very dry stuff that maybe you don't want to read. Yeah. But yeah, like I had a book I quit because literally every single time it started to get interesting, the chapter would end and the next chapter would pick up days later, and it would sort of wrap up what had happened in a couple of sentences. And I'm like, okay, but I actually want to see the action, so to speak, happen, right? And like once or twice as a plot device, it works. But when you keep doing it, it was just irritating me because I said, it's kind of like, imagine you're bringing a forkful of something that you know is going to be delicious up to your mouth, and just when you almost get it there, it falls off and lands on your plate. We all hate that feeling, right? Yeah, your mouth's watering, you're just like, oh, I'm going to eat this delicious thing, and then boom, gone. And I said, that's what it felt like over and over and over again. Yeah, it was very annoying. So yeah, I quit. It was an author that I had enjoyed before, but yeah, the constant use of that as a plot device. After about the fourth or fifth time, I was like, okay, I'm done. If you can't even be bothered to write the interesting bits, why are you even writing at all? Yeah. Yeah, although I complain about required reading, but I actually found some good books that I enjoyed in high school because we were required to read them. That was how I got started on Agatha Christie, was they made us read And Then There Were None. And that is one of my all-time favorite books now. Yeah. And it was one of those, I put it off because the teacher set the pace of like, if you read 30 pages a night, you'll be done by such and such a date. And of course, me being a procrastinator would leave it until like the night before and then have to read the whole thing. Fortunately, I'm a natural speed reader. I always have been. So I could do it, but yeah. Anyway, so I was like, oh, I have to read this whole book. And then I got maybe 3 chapters and I was like, wow, this is really interesting, So yeah. I knew my mom liked Agatha Christie, but yeah, I hadn't really read much mystery at that point. And yeah, so I still read her stuff. But none of her other books have measured up, in my opinion. That was her best. Yeah. They did, an adaptation, a miniseries, which was okay, but the book was better, which I mean, pretty much every reader says that, right? Yeah, there was one I shared that said, if you think I'm going to sit there through a, 8-hour miniseries that includes every single detail of the book that it was based on, you're right, I'm in, Yeah, that's one thing I really enjoy with the rise of serialized miniseries and stuff, or big, long TV series of books, is because when they used to make them into movies, you really had to squash things down, and often your favorite scenes would be missing because they were trying to make it fit into 2 hours, maybe 3 if you were lucky. And, some of these books needed 8 hours to do them justice, right? And so I really like now, with the rise of TV, that they can do that. Yeah, Netflix bought the rights to the Narnia series, but as far as I can tell, they have not actually done anything with it, which I was really looking forward to. Because, yeah, that was definitely a favorite series growing up. And that was also a required reading book, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Yeah, my son had to read it too, but yeah, by the time we actually got to it, I think it was in 4th grade, I had already read it like 3 times, so... Because they did an adaptation in 1988, I think. The BBC did a adaptation, and yeah, it was good. I mean, the special effects weren't the greatest, and some of the costumes were quite laughable. They said the beavers, they said if one of the actors fell over, somebody had to come and like pick them up and stand them up again because they couldn't get up again because of they were basically like these big long tubes and you couldn't bend at the waist. Yeah. So they couldn't afford like CGI and stuff, and technology wasn't really that good yet at that point, but I said if you can look past that, it's still a favorite for me because they did really good at capturing the details of the book and including lifting lines of dialogue, like word for word from the book. Yeah, which if you've read it more than once, you know that, right? Because I remember watching the behind the scenes when A&E did, they did their 6-episode adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. And they said there was more than once the director said, I'm sorry, but we need to reshoot this because you got these 2 words switched in the dialogue, and people know exactly how Jane Austen said something, so if you get it wrong, it's going to bother them, so, yeah. But yeah, they lifted it directly, like, there's in the beginning, Mrs. Bennet is saying that there's a single man of large fortune moving into the neighborhood, and then Lizzie says, yes, because, any single man of large fortune must be in want of a wife, because that's, of course, the opening line of the book, right? And it was prose, but they found a way to have a character say it because, yeah, it's a very famous opening line and you want to have it, right? Yeah. Yeah, I've seen other adaptations, but that is my favorite with Colin Firth and Jennifer Ely. That is, in my opinion, the definitive version, yeah. Yeah, it was funny because I had a friend who was taking an English lit course, and she said, oh my gosh, I'm required to read all of Pride and Prejudice, and it's, it's a big book. And I said, well, watch A&E's adaptation. It's got everything there. And then she's like, you didn't tell me it was 5 hours. I said, okay, but if you were to read the book, it would take you longer than 5 hours. It's a long, big book, So she's like, yeah, I guess you're right there. So, yeah. Yeah, so many great lines. Do you not wish to know? You want to tell me, my dear, and I have no objection to hearing it. Is apparently, I watched some biographies and stuff about Jane Austen, and they said that Mr. Bennet probably resembled her character the best. His very dry observations that half the time people don't realize that he's poking fun at them, right? Yeah. Ah, flattering with delicacy is a great skill, you know, he says to Mr. Collins. Do the thoughts, you know, arrive at the moment, or are they the object of previous study, you know? And he does, and of course Mr. Collins doesn't realize that he's making fun of him. Oh, that's no good. Yeah, there we go. Don't want to sew other threads into that thread. Yeah, in fact, it was funny because my husband bought me, because I had one that I recorded off of TV, but he bought me the official set, VHS back then, right? The 6 VHS videotape set for my birthday, but he wasn't interested in it, you know. So he sat there next to me while I was watching it, and I watched the first 2 episodes, and then I got up to make myself some food. And he says, aren't you going to put the next one in? I'm like, oh, I thought you weren't interested in this. He's like, it got interesting. Yeah, my son enjoyed it too. Again, I wasn't trying to get him to watch it with me. I was just watching it, and he started watching it with me. And yeah, he enjoys it. He's watched it more than once now with me. Oh dear. I think I'm going to have to reset here. Yeah, at least that one. Yeah, I'm kind of reaching the edge, and my grid lines are kind of big loops at the edge because I leave some slack in them because I didn't want to distort the fabric, but then that means there are more loops for me to accidentally catch with my stitching thread, which I don't want to do. So yeah. So yeah, I think that's what I might do for now. I'm just gonna slide these needles off and kind of detangle all these threads. Let me just loop that over there to sort of keep it out of my way if I can. So yeah, I'm going to take all of these here because I'm not working this area yet. I'm going to tuck these all the way there. Then I have a lot fewer here to get messed up. So yeah, once again, kind of growing out, and then I will work around those edges there. Working each little sort of motif. Okay. I'm working right over to the far edge, so I'm going to add an extra pillow to my stack of pillows here for my left elbow. Yeah. I like having something to rest it on, then my arm doesn't get tired as quickly than if I was having to actually, you know, hold it up, hovering over the work. Yeah. Yeah, that was another way I worked to increase my speed, was learning to stitch two-handed. It felt really weird for the first week or so, but now I'm actually so used to it. If I tried to switch back to stitching with just my right hand, yeah, that would feel weird to me now. Okay, so yeah, one of my favorite lines from Pride and Prejudice is, "Nothing you say shall ever vex me again." And then Mr. Bennet says, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear it." "No one knows how I suffer with my poor nerves, but I never complain." She says, yeah, that's all she does is complain. Yeah, it's interesting how in almost every one of her books there's some character who's just, oh, I'm so sick, you know. They act as if they're dying constantly, even though they're actually fine. Or at least, if not fine, they're not gravely ill, you know. Yeah, so the color changes into this, I don't know what it is, call it meatball on a skewer symbol. I'm not going to do those. That's sort of where I'm cutting it off there. Yeah. Yeah, I kind of name my symbols in my head. Yeah, when I used to stitch from paper, so sometimes my husband would hear me muttering, "Where's the metronome?" You know? It's like, what? And then, yeah. Yeah, that's, again, another thing I love about the app is you don't have to go searching through the color key. It automatically brings up the color number for you. That also saves time, I find. Yeah, I used to spend so much time going through the the legend trying to find which color each symbol corresponded to. I didn't really trust myself to memorize it either. Pardon me. coloring that one there. Oh, my foot's gone numb. Ugh. Didn't realize well until I went to move it now. Ah, pins and needles. Ah, there we go. No, I think I'm looking at the wrong one. Yep, I'm looking at that one there. Almost mixed myself up, but I caught myself in time. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so like I said, in the next pass, I may reach the milestone of my first 0, but it won't be until a ways into it. So probably not till like February, March. Yeah. Maybe. We'll see. Yeah, that'll be exciting. But yeah, I'm going to say I'm going to be probably close to 2/3 completed before I hit that milestone. Okay. Yeah, let's see. I don't think this strand's very long. Yeah. Oh, that's no good. Let's try that again. There we go. Don't want to sew through other threads like that. That is not good. Ah. Yeah, sometimes I can get the slightly uneven ones to thread, but sometimes they just will not. this one here for those two. Oh goodness, doing it again. I tell ya. Nope, that's there. Oh, that already had a needle on it. My mistake. Oh, I tell you. There we go. Okay, so I think what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to shift up, yeah, and I'm going to start working in this indentation here and fill in that stuff there. So yeah, I'm going to come back over to this edge there and start working from that. So I'm actually going to do this one right here. Yeah, I'm going to end up with threads going all over the place here. That's okay. Okay. Actually, I won't do that one yet. Oops. Okay, so see how long that piece is. Okay, that actually is fairly long. All right. Oops. Take a look here. Okay, perfect. Since I have a longer piece attached up there, I'm going to bring that one down to this area. But I want to do this one here in the corner first. Then it won't get closed in. Oh, that one didn't disappear perfectly, but oh well. I'm going to be stitching over it with other purples, so it's not going to be noticeable. Okay, felt like that might have been a snarl, but it wasn't. I think it was about to snarl and then it released the last second. Yeah, because I could feel underneath it's smooth. So it did not tangle. Okay, actually, now that I look at this, I will do this one first and then stitch around it. So did that one, and then that way I'm going to do these and back up. I think I'll stitch to about 200, and then that will be where I take a break for today. Yeah, so if you look at the pattern, you can see it does this, and there's another little circular bit there. So yeah, just slowly filling them in, just following the curves the colors make across the pattern. Okay, so I think this This is a short, yeah, it's only enough for one stitch. That's what I thought. Oops. Yeah, so pretty soon I'm going to have to switch from pin stitching to drawing across the back. That way the ends all end up towards the center of the piece and they don't stick out across the past the edge and potentially show through the fabric, especially when they're dark colors. You really don't want that. Nope, whoops. Accidentally frogged one instead of stitching it, which is not what I was trying to do. So yeah, I filled in all of that because I wanted to be able to travel this one down and do it with this thread in this area here. Okay, so I'm going to do those and park, and then I think that's where I'm going to take a break. That will take me to past 200. I wasn't expecting to get that high of a number, so yeah, bonus. There, 203, perfect. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you here next time. Thanks, everyone.